Welcome. We're so excited to have you here with us tonight. Come close. I know the wind is blowing and it's cool, so get closer to each other. We have a few chairs open up front, even closer. You're going to want to be close for this conversation. I'm so honored to have the chance to host the conversation between two incredible leaders, activists. Can you guys hear me? All right, we're turning up the mic. I'm seeing the signs. I'm so happy to have all of you here with us. I'm Amy Christensen. I founded the Sun Valley Forum in 2015. This is our 7th forum. Thank you for being with us. Thank you. And tonight, I couldn't be more honored to host these two incredible people for a powerful conversation between the icon, singer-songwriter Carole King, who found her calling in her teens, and then we have Barrett, who found his calling in his teens. And how do they keep hope? How do they continue to push? Where are they now? What's next? We're going to have a fantastic conversation. They're going to have a fantastic conversation. I'm going to hand it over to the two of them. And Carole, her first hit with her husband, Jerry Goffin, was 1961, I think, Will You Love Me Tomorrow? And of course, there was Tapestry and everything else. And we in Sun Valley, Idaho are so fortunate. She has been a resident of Idaho since the 1970s, and she lives just down the street. And we get to see her and spend time with her. And then we have Barrett, who first joined us as one of the plaintiffs in the case, Juliana versus United States. And if you didn't see the panel earlier, or you haven't seen Youth v. Gov, you must. Youth v. Gov is the documentary story of these young people. Vic was 13, 14?
Is your birth turned on?
All right, 15 when the case started. Still, 15 when the case started. And they raised their voices as young people and joined a lawsuit to sue the United States government for undermining action on climate change, not just not doing anything. And this is establishing the constitutional case. And so it's an incredibly groundbreaking lawsuit. And the story, Youth v. Gov, the film, it's on Netflix. It came out April 29th. It went to 61. I've gone over these numbers so many times with Christy, the director. She's laughing. 51 festivals, 26 jury and audience awards already. It's a fantastic film, so you have to see Youth v. Gov, and you'll hear the whole story. So please join me in welcoming the icon Carole King and the incredible Barrett to the stage. And they're going to start with what got them started on their leadership for our planet.
All right, go ahead. This is Barrett, and you saw Vic in the film. How many of you watched the film? Oh, lots. Well, if you haven't, you have to watch Youth v. Gov, and Vic is in the film along with 20. You take it from here. Explain.
Yeah. So a lawsuit of 21 young people suing the U.S. federal government for the direct action they've taken to instigate the global climate crisis. And especially looking back at the fact that back into the 1950s, the 1960s, presidents were briefed on and aware of the fact that a fossil fuel infrastructure system was going to be catastrophic for the climate, and still decided to put profit over posterity and kind of move on forward with a fossil fuel economy here in the United States, despite all the chances they had to find alternatives.
Can you put the mic closer? Can people hear
I can
you
do
better?
that.
Is that better?
Anything you said.
I've been doing this for longer than you have. I was so in awe of the courage of those kids. And, now they're 8 years older, but, they were very young. There were 21 of them, and it was quite energizing for me. My history in the world of environment, for those of you may know, I think most of the public knows that I'm famous for my singing, but also for my environmental activism. But what it specifically has been is to advocate for the Northern Rockies Ecosystem Protection Act, which is basically a wilderness bill, but instead of protecting a sliver here and a sliver there and what you can get realistically in politics, it's based on science. It's based on the range of the grizzly bear, which is an umbrella species or a keystone species that tells you the health of that ecosystem. And for years, everybody's been saying, it's too big, you'll never get it passed, you're going up against everything. Well, big was the point. You know, go big or go home. But big was the point because that's what we needed to protect. You can't protect it in pieces. So that's what I've been working on for 32 years. Thank you. It's still alive. It's been a bill in the House since 1992, actually. Carolyn Maloney took it over in 93, and she's been the lead sponsor ever since. It's been alive every session, and it has to be reintroduced every session. It got into the Senate in 2016. Sheldon Whitehouse is our lead sponsor, and that is still alive. So that's an accomplishment. But the actual accomplishment of getting it done, that hasn't happened yet. And one of the things that is inspiring me is seeing this film and what you and your little family, I know y'all refer to yourselves as a family, and I get it. I feel that way about the activists I work with. We are really trying to do the same thing because logging is a big emitter of carbon. And we probably know that, those of us who live around here or who live out west, we know the damage that logging can do. We've seen clear cuts. We go hiking and, you know, there's a sign saying, oh, don't go here. And the reason is they're trying to hide a clear cut. But a lot of the kids don't know that. They're focused on fossil fuels, and rightly so. So my mission really is to try to get the word out to the kids that are so impassioned, rightly so, about fossil fuels, but also logging is a problem. And the president can, as Clinton did in his presidency, put a moratorium on logging in our national forests. We can't stop all logging. So that's kind of what I'm here to talk about and let you know what my end of it is, but also just to say ask you what it's been like and what you're doing now and where you're going from the film.
Yeah, I'll definitely start out with saying, like, I think the stage you just set is really exciting too, because I think ambition is such an important word for this conversation, because if young people today didn't already know that there was people before us who are willing to be ambitious, the system teaches you to be everything but that. So you have to learn that from, you know, your relatives, you know, in this human experience. So I really appreciate you saying that, and kind of that ambition of asking for all that land to be protected had to happen for 21 young people to be ambitious enough to take on the U.S. federal government in their own court. I was going to say on their own court, but it works both ways, I guess. So I really appreciate you setting the stage of the conversation with just ambition is so important and so important to encourage in people. And if we didn't have folks who already leaned into it so heavily, there's a lot of things that wouldn't have changed. You know, we might not have been sitting here together right now. So I really appreciate you setting that stage, and also giving the background too for just how you got involved and what. It's always nice to hear kind of what catalyzes people and what gets them energetic. For you is protecting all this land. I know for me it was reflecting on my own lived experience as a human being with the identities I hold, and realizing there's a lot of other people who have that shared experience and wanting to protect them from the vulnerability that they exist in, not just because of climate change, but because of all types of intersectional issues. And with the lawsuit, where we're at right now is just back in that bureaucratic court system, trying to file a motion to amend, trying to get the U.S. federal government to agree that a safe and stable climate is a constitutional right, which you would hope wouldn't be rocket science, but, you know, a lot of things are for the U.S. federal government. Just like you even educated me so much in the conversation we had to have before this, just about, especially in the forest system. Like, I just learned that the Forest Service is under the Department of Agriculture because we treat forests as a crop instead of something to protect. I don't know if, I don't know, you dropped so many facts on me yesterday that I'm sure a lot of people would love to learn more about, but, or even just, yeah.
Well, so you now live in Madison, Wisconsin.
Yeah.
And what are you doing now? What is your work there now?
Yeah, I live in Madison full time. I work full time for a nonprofit organization known as the Power Shift Network.
Partnership Network?
Power Shift Network.
Power Shift Network.
Yes.
Okay.
So
Make note. Send money.
Yes. But powershift.org, if anyone is curious. But yeah, at the Power Shift Network, basically what we do is movement building, which clearly means so many things. But we're a network of 120 climate justice focused organizations from all over the country, and even some other countries, who are all working towards a common goal and maybe in different ways. And my job there is to just, make sure that the movement stays a movement. We're in this age where there's so many nonprofits talking about so many things, but we also have to remember sometimes that we're all talking about the same thing, which means that we can help each other out a lot when we work together. And so I kind of have the abstract job of just facilitating connections and partnerships between people. I know we had an awesome talk today that was all about partnerships, and it was really inspiring, so shout out to but yeah, so that's that's what I do at Power Shift. And also a lot of very, when I get off of work, I play with my cat or play PlayStation, pick up my girlfriend from work. A lot of regular 23-year-old things, too. I don't always do things like this.
No, but that's really important.
Yeah.
It really is important because even in my professional career, my priority has been to make sure that I had a semblance of a normal life, which I've managed to do. And Idaho has been such a big part of that. I've lived in Idaho since 1977 and have lived in different parts of the state, including for 38 years just over the mountain in the next county, which is politically different than perhaps my views would be, let us say.
Yeah.
But it was an amazing experience, and that's kind of what got me involved in this, is I lived in these forests, and I saw the intrinsic value of them. And I saw the economic value of them taking over completely. And that's kind of what got me involved in this first. But a normal life has been very important to me, and I found it here in Idaho, and if you consider this a normal life, but it is a beautiful place, and it gave me this appreciation for this aspect. But then you have broadened my vision into, I'm trying to protect our local ecosystem, which extends into Eastern Oregon, Eastern Washington, Western Wyoming, and the whole of all the roadless areas in Idaho and Montana. Mm-hmm. But, the climate is bigger than that. It's so much bigger than that. And you've taken that on. I'm just so in awe of you and your generation and what you're doing.
I really, really appreciate that. And honestly, this brings up you talking about, the normal life. I feel like a normal life is also about your interests and your passions and what you care about. And I wanted to ask you, as an artist, as a songwriter, I think that storytelling and art are a big part of movements and even being able to make people care about things. And I was just curious about maybe where your career as an artist and a storyteller is overlapped with your work as an advocate as well.
Well, it totally has, but in various ways. For example, I've written songs about nature. I think of a song called Morning Sun that wasn't one of the famous ones, but it's, talks about nature and the seasons and things like that. But it's part of why I got into the movement is because I had become famous. And I could get in the door, a congressional door. But then once I got into the congressional door, I needed to know what I was talking about. And that's when I really began to learn. I do know what I'm talking about, but I have learned. And I've learned from so many great people, some of whom will be speaking tomorrow, like the scientists and the the people who actually write the language of the bills that we want and stuff. And so that's how I got drawn into doing this work. But this work is just, it's my other whole career, and it's not been as successful, but we're just going to keep at it, aren't we? I also just want to, I just got a note to speak. Somebody wanted to speak about logging the last 5% of old growth redwoods. I don't know if we have time to have other speakers because we have such a limited time, but I did want to mention that because they are trying to do that, are they not? SaveJackson.org. Wyoming? California, right, redwoods, duh. California coast.
We can't know everything.
Anyway, thank you. Okay. So I wanted to ask, we actually touched on this yesterday. When I used to march, I marched a long time. We're still marching for, abortion health care. We're still trying to protect that even after we got it done. But when I used to march, we had a lot of hope. We had a lot of hope. We believed that we could change things. And I have lost a lot of my faith that what I'm doing, what everybody's doing, I don't know if it's going to work. I do know that I must keep doing it because the alternative of not doing it is not okay. So what I want to know is what gives you hope and your generation. I know you can't speak for everyone, but speak for you.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that give me hope, and I think that there's an interesting line between just hope and motivation, and there's an inherent intrinsic part of me that just knows that things are not great, so we have to do something about it. And that's not necessarily what hope is, but it definitely contributes to that feeling of hope, or at least being able to garner it. I feel like I've mentioned a few times at this conference, to me, hope lies in our ability to care about our neighbor, and the fact that even somebody who doesn't agree with anything we would be talking about here right now and would think this, even that person has somebody that they care about. That's like the shared human experience we have, people that we care about and that we want to protect. And I think that being so inherent in all of us, even when it doesn't seem like it at all, is something that gives me a lot of hope. And I think something that gives me a lot of hope is, even though we can sit here and definitely acknowledge that a lot of things haven't changed and a lot of things maybe are going back to the way they are, it's just a fact that a lot of people over time have worked really hard to build the world that they thought would be best for folks, you included. And you can't ignore that. You can't ignore that movement history. Young people wouldn't have just garnered up the idea for 400,000 people to march in New York City in the New York City climate strike if people weren't marching against the war in Vietnam, if people didn't hold the March on Washington. We learn from those who came before us. Movements aren't just these abstract things that come together. They're strategic, and they have tactics and strategies. And we didn't just make all those things up as young people, in the last few years. We learned from the folks who came before us, and I think that knowing all the things that have changed, maybe not in my lifetime, but before it, in order for me to even have the lived experience that I've been able to have, is something that gives me a world of hope.
Yeah. Yes. Yay. We talked about we met for the first time yesterday, and we just had this amazing conversation that just flowed, and there's just so much so many thoughts are coming to mind, but I find hope in an inspiration in what you're doing, because I am now 80. That's a number I never thought I'd be associated with, but here we are. And I'm doing okay so far, knock wood. But I'm not, this is a time I feel a shift in the way I think about things. And the way I think about things is that I did what I did and I'm doing what I can, but you are the future and you're the energy, and you and your generation are doing such an amazing job and the social networks, which, God love them, they're horrible and they're amazing, both.
Agreed.
And the ability of your generation to use them to mobilize people, it's just so great. And when I saw, like in the movie, all those people marching, I'm like, oh my God. So one of the things I'm really happy about is to get to merge what we do, what we're doing, so that you include what I've been doing and I include what you're doing, and we are really one movement. And really, if you look at all the things that we want to change, there's so many things on so many levels that we want to change, from like what I mentioned before, and like, kids are afraid of violence and schools and stuff. It's actually all connected. It's trying to lift people. It's trying to make the world a better place. And I also want to bring into this conversation the fact that I have had access to political people at all levels. I've spent time with Joe Biden, for example, campaigning with him in Pennsylvania on a bus. You really get to know, for our neighbor, John Kerry, in '04. And there are a lot of really good people who really want to do good things, who get into politics because they want to lift people. And there's an element that wants to crush people. And I just want to report to everybody, anybody who's thinking, I know you're not, I know you have your hope, but I'm still saying that they're not all the same. They're not all corrupt. They're not all horrible. There are people trying to make it better. And it is a system that is very difficult to overcome, even if your intentions are really good. And the way we overcome is in numbers too big to ignore, dispute, anything like that. We do have to keep going. And each of us can make a difference. And that's what is keeping me going. I don't know if I can make a difference. I have to believe I can, so I choose to believe that I can. But even if I can't, I must do the work I do. And you said the same thing. You have to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Amy?
Interrupt if Vic wants to jump
well,
in.
I guess the only thing that I would add to the conversation of and what I would leave everyone here with, I think this is a great example of having conversations in general is so important, and you can learn something from anybody. So obviously I'm not an incredibly famous and talented songwriter, and you're not a 23-year-old kid, but we can still have, there's so much that we can learn from each other. And I think that if you could figure out how to replicate a conversation that you wouldn't think would happen in your life, there's a lot that you could probably learn from it. So that's what I would
Well, that's
encourage
exactly
you all
what
to
I was
have.
going to ask you is, what do you want people to take away from tonight? And
Well,
that
I'm
seems
sorry I
like a
stepped on your
really
shoe.
amazing. No. It's like the perfect answer is that. And
Mm-hmm.
Carole, what do you want people to take away from tonight?
Well, just the fact that the climate movement as a whole, is massive. It's worldwide. It's amazing. They're not talking about logging very much. And logging emits, this is a fact, logging emits as much carbon annually, or an amount of carbon annually, that's comparable to the amount of carbon emitted by burning coal in the U.S. So this is just in the U.S. So that people need to know that. And if anybody is here because they're passionate about the climate and they don't know about logging, if you don't know about logging as part of the problem, it is part of the problem. It's being done in our national forests just as at our expense. Taxpayers subsidize the destruction, the clear cutting of our forests. And I don't know if we're going to get to see this tomorrow when we have visuals, but if you go home or wait till this is over to look it up, look up Feller Buncher, Oregon. Feller, F-E-L-L-E-R, like felling a tree. Feller Buncher, like a bunch of carrots, buncher. And they kind of do that with logs. And then Oregon, because that's the one I found that is just, you see what they do? You see that this massive machine takes a giant claw, grabs a big tree. I'm talking about a big tree, maybe, at least in this film, half the distance between these posts. And I'm sure bigger ones that do that. They grab it, a saw comes out from under the machine and goes zzz, and then they take the tree. This is one operator, one job, folks. It's not about jobs. It's all mechanized. Takes the tree, runs it through something that strips the branches and leaves off, which they then leave there, and it's called slash. When they say slash, that's what they're talking about, the branches and the unprofitable parts of the tree. And then they pile the tree, former tree, into a pile of logs. And they do one tree in the time it took me to just tell you about that. And when you see it, it is absolutely horrifying. So just know that your tax dollars are going to subsidize that. And you have talked in your film about how tax dollars are going to subsidize the fossil fuel industries. So that's what I want everyone to take away. When you think about climate, know that logging is a huge part, and especially in our national forests, which we can stop if we get our Congress and our president and just keep on them about that.
Thank you. So what I'm taking away from this is the inspiration from two people who are dedicating their lives at very different times in your lives to leverage the assets that you have, your intelligence, your voice, your fame, your incredible ability to connect with people. Vic, I just have had this experience of the years of knowing you and your dedication. And so I think you inspire in me just that renewed commitment to do everything I can in whatever way that is to be part of building and shaping this world that we want and we need to have. So thank you very much for everything you do. Thank you for being with us, both of you.
Thank you, Amy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your work. Thank you all so much.